The National Desk, America's News Now.
Indicted again. The GOP field reacts as Donald Trump still leads the pack.
Sadly, the president was surrounded by a group of crackpot lawyers that kept telling him what his itching ears wanted to hear.
Raging wildfires scorching the West Coast. Thousands of acres on fire as we come on the air. But finally, a sign of hope. And a scare at the Senate, U.S. Capitol Police responding to a call of an active shooter in one of the Capitol Hill office buildings.
We have close to 200 police officers going floor to floor through all three Senate office buildings.
This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. We're glad you're with us. Former President Donald Trump is scheduled to appear in court tomorrow at 4 p.m. right here in D.C. to be arraigned on the latest charges against him. Although it is possible he may do so virtually. In this case, the judge selected randomly to preside over proceedings is Judge Tanya Chutkan, who was nominated by President Obama to the bench in 2014 and was confirmed unanimously 95-0. This is not her first Donald Trump case in the fall of 2021. In fact, Chutkan ruled the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6 attack on the United States Capitol was allowed to review Trump's White House files. A lot of that evidence is in the latest indictment by Special Counsel Jack Smith. She also has experience with January 6 defendants. On multiple occasions, Chutkan exceeded prosecutors' recommendations to give harsher sentences to convicted January 6 rioters. Meantime, Republicans are split on the reaction to former President Donald Trump's latest indictment. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins joining us with that story from Washington.
Donald Trump's third indictment doing little to rattle public support from much of the GOP.
We're learning in America the greatest crime you can have is to be a Republican.
Staunch allies on Capitol Hill standing firm in support. Marjorie Taylor Greene writing, "I will still vote for Trump even if he's in jail." The indictment sparking different reactions from those taking on Trump in the 2024 GOP presidential primary. Former Vice President Mike Pence supporting the charges.
On that day, President Trump asked me to put him over the Constitution, but I chose the Constitution.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis using the opportunity to rail against the weaponization of the federal government.
We need to put all this stuff behind us by fixing the government, by reconstitutionalizing it, and not have all this unnecessary stuff swirling around dividing our country all the time.
DeSantis stopping short of giving direct support of Trump personally. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott slamming what he calls two different tracks of justice, accusing Biden's DOJ of hunting Republicans while protecting Democrats. Scott also avoiding a direct mention of Trump. Vivek Ramaswamy appearing to give Trump the most support among the 2024 contenders.
This sets an awful precedent in our country. They're going full banana republic.
This indictment, Trump's third, isn't expected to hurt his standing among Republican voters. In fact, before Alvin Bragg brought the first charges against Trump in New York, he was polling at 45% among GOP primary voters. After the indictment, his numbers rose to 54%, giving him a leg up over challengers that has yet to waver.
Trump also faces a possible fourth indictment in the state of Georgia for efforts to overturn the 2020 election. In a poll from June, 61% of Republicans say these indictments don't affect how they view the former president. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
President Biden is still vacationing in Delaware this week. He took another bike ride with his family this afternoon. He is yet to comment on Donald Trump's latest indictment. Special Counsel Jack Smith has asked Judge Eileen Cannon, who is hearing the case of the Mar-a-Lago classified documents, for a hearing to discuss a possible conflict of interest of defense attorney Stanley Woodward, who is representing Walt Nauta and other witnesses. We don't know exactly what that conflict is, but according to NBC, Stanley Woodward has declined to comment. Right now, 67 large fires are now burning more than 388,000 acres in 11 states. Look at this terrifying video here. More than 10,000 wildland firefighters and support personnel are working to combat them. The York Fire is California's largest fire of the year, has burned through more than 82,000 acres in California and Nevada. As of this morning, since it started Friday, it is 30% contained. The Mojave National Preserve says spinning columns of fire are being created by vortexes of flames and smoke. In the Northwest, the Eagle Bluff fire has burned through more than 18,000 acres on the U.S.-Canadian border north of Washington since it started Saturday. Officials say conditions are improving on the U.S. side and evacuations in Washington have been reduced. The fire is only about 10% contained. The dangerous heat wave continues with more than 54 million Americans under heat alerts today. Parts of the central and southern plains of the lower Mississippi Valley and the Gulf Coast could see temperatures in the 90s or even triple digits this week. Heat indices are forecast to reach up to 150 degrees in places like Dallas, Austin, Little Rock, and New Orleans. The U.S. Senate office buildings were placed on lockdown and then evacuated this afternoon as U.S. Capitol Police searched for an alleged shooter inside the complex. Capitol Police receiving a 911 call just before 3 p.m. but did not confirm any shots were fired. Here at the National Desk, we have been told directly by a Senate staffer, armed guards came into their Senate office, patted each staffer down, and then escorted them all out before locking the office. Although after searching for more than an hour, Capitol Police found nothing of concern.
I think at this point we can say that we've found no confirmation that there was an active shooter and that this may have been a bogus call.
2 carjacking suspects of a semi-truck in Ohio were killed today after they exchanged shots with local police near the Dayton airport. 1 male and 1 female were taken to Miami Valley Hospital and were pronounced dead this afternoon. The suspects were accused of holding a truck driver hostage during an hours-long standoff. Police had chased the suspects across 4 counties before stopping them outside of a truck stop in London, Ohio. The hostage is alive and suffered minor injuries. The Pittsburgh synagogue gunman Robert Bowers will be sentenced to death for the nation's worst anti-Semitic attack, a jury decided. It took jurors 2 parts of 2 days to come to the unanimous decision. The jury convicted Bowers in June for the 2018 mass shooting that left 11 people dead. Prosecutors say religious hatred motivated Bowers, while the defense says he acted out of a delusional belief. The judge will formally impose the sentence at a hearing tomorrow. Talking about your money now, it was a rocky day on Wall Street as the investors digest the impact of a downgrade to the United States credit rating from AAA to AA+ by Fitch Ratings. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar explains what this means for the country and how it could impact households.
A blow to the credibility of U.S. debt from one of the top 3 rating agencies occurring for the first time since 2011 and for only the second time in history. Fitch Ratings says their downgrade is based on expected fiscal deterioration over the next 3 years, a growing government debt burden, and the erosion of governance compared to other top-rated countries. The firm reportedly cited January 6th as an example during a meeting with Biden administration officials.
We're very safe. Still an extremely safe asset, but not quite as good as AAA.
At best.
Mark Goldwine, Senior Vice President and Senior Policy Director for the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, notes the U.S. still holds the world's reserve currency and remains the safest place to park large sums of money.
My hope is that this does not have an effect on everyday people. The risk is if there are further downgrades,
which would come with even higher interest rates, slower economic growth, and an overall weaker economy. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen calling the downgrade arbitrary and based on outdated data. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre blames, quote, extremism by Republican officials, like seeking to extend deficit-busting tax giveaways for the wealthy and corporations. The Republican Party blaming President Biden and Democrats, who say they, quote, took the country to the brink of default amid an increasingly unsteady economic path.
I'm worried this is actually going to create more divisiveness, which is actually going to feed right into the very thing that the downgrade warned about.
That plus the rising cost of Medicare and Social Security, rising deficits in which interest payments are on track to outpace defense spending, and the frequent threat of debt ceiling crises and government shutdowns.
And speaking of, Congress may be staring down the barrel of another government shutdown if they don't pass a budget or stopgap bill by September 30th. And as we've been seeing, Dee, tensions between the two parties are only getting worse, not just with news of this credit downgrading, but also the Hunter Biden investigation and news of a third indictment against former President Trump.
No doubt. And Atra, also, what did Fitch say about the U.S. slipping into a recession? We know that's something that experts have gone back and forth about.
Right. So Fitch projects the U.S. will enter a mild recession at the end of this year and beginning of next year. And they project that overall real GDP growth next year will be just 0.5%. To give you an idea of how far off that is from where we are now, the last GDP rating we got of the second quarter from the Commerce Department was 2.4%. And that was pretty good. That was more than people were expecting. Now, Fitch, in making this assessment about a recession prediction, they're saying it would come from tighter credit, which we are starting to see after those bank collapses earlier this year, weakening of business investment, which we're seeing somewhat, but really not too much, and then slowed consumption, which we're certainly not seeing in the services sector, especially not this summer, very busy travel season. And this Fitch forecast is certainly contrasting what Fed economists now say. They no longer think there will be a recession.
All right, Atra El-Nashar reporting from the Capitol tonight. Thank you.
Thanks.
Coming up next, what analysts say is the real reason behind a recent rise in gas prices in the U.S. Then, new information about a possible connection between hearing loss and Alzheimer's. And later on, drinking and riding could be just as dangerous as drinking and driving. We'll explain right after the break. Private companies in the U.S. added 324,000 new jobs last month, according to ADP, well above expectations. The increase was mostly driven by hotels, restaurants, bars, and related businesses. Some experts say it's another sign that the job market is still strong, despite the Fed's efforts to slow the economy. Mortgage rates are still high. The average rate for a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage increased last week from 6.87% to 6.93%, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association. That number was 5.43% a year ago. Gas prices are going up. According to AAA, the national price for a gallon of gas is now $3.80. That's almost 30 cents higher than a month ago. We're told oil production cuts by OPEC is an important reason why. But so is this summer's higher temperatures, which are resulting in lower refinery capacity in the U.S. Also, alternative energy sources are not picking up the slack for a variety of reasons, according to analysts.
Permitting in the United States takes forever and lets a few locals who don't want their views spoiled block or delay projects for years. And that, of course, raises their costs. Tariffs and Buy American rules raise the price of steel and concrete and other construction materials.
Some analysts also point to higher U.S. gas exports as Europe and others struggled amid reduced Russian output. That's dipping into the overall domestic supply, even as demand this summer is lower than average. By the numbers now, the first GOP primary debate is just 3 weeks away, and new reports indicate it may be even harder for candidates to qualify for the next one in September. At least 7 candidates have qualified for the first debate by polling at least 1% and getting 40,000 unique donors. But the next one will require polling at least 3% and at least 50,000 unique donors. Under that criteria, only 5 candidates would qualify today. Americans' approval of the Supreme Court is sitting tight at a record low. Look right here. According to a recent Gallup poll, 40% of Americans approve of how the bench is handling its job. It's the same rating found last September before the start of the term. The first record low was recorded in September 2021 after the court allowed a restrictive Texas abortion law to stand, which was a precursor to its overturning of Roe versus Wade. Right before that term, Americans gave the bench a 49% approval rating. Police departments across the country are struggling to hire, and the latest efforts to staff up law enforcement may be circumventing the law by allowing non-citizens to carry a badge and a gun. The National Desk Angela Brown joins us now with how police officers are raising concerns about this.
We are counting at least 3 states that allow non-citizens to become police officers. The latest state to jump on board is Illinois. I spoke with a former Illinois police officer who says there will be legal challenges and is warning about background checks. Here's House Bill 3751. It says an individual who is not a citizen but is legally authorized to work in the United States under federal law is authorized to apply for the position of police officer. We talked to the spokesperson for the National Police Association about non-Americans arresting Americans on American soil.
Understand one of the big problems with this, if you hire somebody to be a police officer who just has a work permit, who came across illegally, you can't do an extensive background check on them. People who are here under DACA, that came as little kids or were born here to illegal parents, you can check their background.
Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker is pushing back against critics who are claiming the bill would allow people who enter the country illegally to become police officers. The governor telling local media in Illinois the law is for those who are legally allowed to work in the country and in Illinois. California and Colorado have passed similar laws allowing non-citizens who are authorized to work in the U.S. to become police officers, while other states like New Jersey are considering measures. States are making this move because many Americans do not want to be police officers. The Marshall Project says the number of law enforcement employees have decreased by 4%, according to the latest data. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
Angela, thank you. More than 40,000 tons of grain damaged by Russia's attack in Odessa last night. This according to the Ukraine Ministry of Defense. Today, they called the attack a terrorist-like action using starvation as a weapon, saying they could have fed millions of people with food storage that was hit. This comes as an alarming new report from the UK, U.S. and European Union today accuses Russia of torture. It claims dozens of Ukrainians held in detention centers in Kherson are being tortured and sexually abused if they are part of Ukraine's military or have family members in the military. Russia has not commented. The Writers Guild of America and studio representatives plan to bring up negotiations again on Friday. This is the first official communication since the strike started 3 months ago. Writers want more pay, streaming residuals, and protections against artificial intelligence use. Researchers are finding a connection between hearing loss and Alzheimer's. How they impact one another has been a question that has been evading answers until now. Medical reporter Liz Bonus explains.
Hey there, everybody. Hello to you. This breakthrough study, one of the first to look at what might change the risk for dementia or early memory decline. Turns out something as simple as this, a hearing assist device could cut your risk in half.
It changes my life when the hearing aids are working effectively.
It's all because, as Darlo Tanner knows, when you can hear, you are connected in a lot of ways.
My family appreciates I don't have the TVs up to 100, and I literally did have it up to 100.
Researchers in a first-of-its-kind study in the journal Lancet have discovered in adults who are at higher risk for cognitive decline, generally those who are older.
We can think of the brain as any other muscle in the body.
That means audiologist Dr. Matthew Kist of Kentucky's Lund Hearing Care Associates says researchers have discovered hearing aids will reduce the risk for cognitive decline, and here's why.
So if we're not actively using that muscle, if it's not getting repetitions, in this case, speech or sound in general, that specific muscle in the brain starts to atrophy. And if you don't use it, you tend to lose it over time.
Researchers studied 3,000 people and compared those given counseling with hearing loss to intervention with hearing aids. In the total group, hearing aids did not appear to make a difference, but in those who were older or who had other risks for memory problems, cognitive decline slowed by 48%.
Especially if there's a case history or a history in the family of cognitive decline, dementia, Alzheimer's, and we start to see signs of hearing loss, we want to fit that patient with hearing aids ASAP just to make sure they're constantly getting that feedback into their ears. We're keeping the brain happy and healthy.
Given this, even though she doesn't think so far it's impacted her memory, Darlo Tanner has this advice.
I recommend anyone, please do not go without being able to hear. I mean, I did it for years and years. Don't do it.
Researchers in this trial say based on this research, she is right. Getting assistance earlier rather than putting it off may have lifelong consequences. I'm medical reporter Liz Bonus. Back to you.
Interesting story, Liz. Thank you. The dangers of drinking and driving are well documented, but drinking and riding could be just as risky. We'll explain right after this. We're taking the pulse of America. Our team of nearly 4,000 local journalists bringing you the headlines from across the country. We start with a new drug law proposal in Seattle.
The problem is now well documented. Open-air drug use, a state leading the nation in fentanyl overdoses, a city paralyzed to act.
Our approach is one to reset norms and expectations in the city.
Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell transmitting legislation to the council that he believes adds to a state law and rectifies the council's failure to do it back in June. Harrell says not only does his legislation codify the state law that makes possession a gross misdemeanor, but adds the money for diversion treatment programs and defines a, quote, threat of harm standard.
And the standard is if people are threatening others, they're in areas where people are trying to shop or walk with a stroller with their children, that our officers should have the ability to make arrests. It's not a war on drugs. If anything, it's a war on the unhealthy conditions that people find themselves under. It's a war against all of that. This is poison.
In 2019, a 21-year-old UT student became the first person in Austin to die in a scooter accident. While deaths are uncommon, injuries are not. And Ascension Seton says the numbers are going up.
We're seeing more e-bike related accidents, no doubt about it.
Dr. Jason Adelot is the chief of trauma surgery at Del Seton Medical Center. The hospital wants to raise awareness about the link between alcohol and e-bike and scooter injuries.
The people who get injured enough on a scooter that they need to be admitted or require some sort of surgery or something like that, a lot of those people have been drinking a little too much.
Matt Rittman says a friend was hospitalized after drinking and riding.
He rode a scooter and he ran into a wall or something. He didn't really remember it.
Rittman says choosing to ride drunk as a safer alternative to driving while intoxicated doesn't make a lot of sense.
You seem less likely to hurt other people, but probably as likely to hurt yourself.
Some people can't even tell their kids because the kids will be so sad.
The death of one local dog is shaking an entire community in Rhode Island. Maple, the beloved dog that has been sitting outside of Brothers Gas in East Providence for the last 12 years, was killed when a driver cut through the parking lot and ran her over. She was a 14-year-old Shepherd Labrador mix. Authorities reportedly told the dog's owner that the driver had a medical episode and would not be charged. The community has planted a maple tree outside the shop as a memorial. The owner says she wishes more eyes were on the dangerous intersection nearby and that drivers often cut through her lot to avoid red lights. We'll be back in 90 seconds. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his wife are separating after 18 years of marriage. They said in a statement on Instagram that the decision came after many meaningful and difficult conversations. The couple got married in 2005. They have 3 children. That's going to do it for us for now. Join us again tonight for the evening edition of the National Desk. Just check your local listings. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks so much for watching.